there, it's Natasha, and thank you so much for joining me today. I have a really fun technique to share with you guys today, and this one is with some Nuvo drops. Now, I'm sure that you could do the same thing with any other kind of drops like this, whether it be the ColourPop's ones or some other brand that is similar to this, but today I'm going to use the Nuvo drops. Now, I do have some transparent ones, which they work really well too, and I use my Nuvo drops a lot, probably mainly the main colors like black and white and gold and silver and things. So some of the other colors that I purchased earlier on, I definitely use them far less. So this is a really fun technique, and I'm going to show you the cards that I ended up creating with these. And all you do is grab a couple of pieces of cardstock, squirt down a blob of the Nuvo drops, and then put another piece of cardstock on top, mush it around with your fingers, and then you get these gorgeous blobs. Now look at all the texture that's in this one, and this one doesn't show it very well, but in a minute you're going to see some very cool things. And then this is kind of just the beginning. So obviously you're going to get two of whatever you kind of create, a mirror image, and you can add more, you can add different colors, you can layer them up. I just really went to town. I did so many of these. It's like when you find a really good technique and you get really into it and you just create lots and lots to see what the possibilities are. Now with this purple one in particular, look at all of that texture that you can see. It kind of reminds me of like a shell, a seashell maybe. But anyhow, you can do any colors you like. As I said, the transparent ones work as well. I have some glitter ones. They work really nicely. You can layer them up, put them together. You can mix the colors. And as I said, I know that this feels like not the kind of intended use of Nuvo drops, but I have never ever had to replace any of my Nuvo drops ever. So when I have purchased the blacks and the whites and all those things that I use really often, I've never ever had to purchase another one. These things last forever. And I know that some of the colors that I have, I want to make sure I use them before. I mean, I don't know if they go bad or they're going to dry up, and I've never ever had that happen, but I want to make sure I use the craft supplies that I have and kind of get the most out of the supplies that I chose to purchase. I probably wouldn't go ahead and purchase all of these colors again. I think I probably got some of them on some sales and things, which is good. But there is a lot of colors here that I in general don't use a lot of. However, I'm not going to get rid of them, and I want to find good ways to use them. So for this one here, I've put the blue rings and then I filled it in with purple in the middle. There is just so many different ways. Some of the ones I did earlier, I did stripes across instead of kind of blobs. And if you don't like what you get, then you can just add more. And these dry really fast. So because there's kind of such a thin layer of Nuvo drops, I found, I mean, it depends on your climate and humidity and all those lovely things, but I found where I am, and it is spring here in New Zealand, that it took around 15 or so minutes for these to dry. Not very long at all for me to wait. I guess you're spreading it out so thin between the two pieces of cardstock. It's not a drop at all of Nuvo drops. So this one is obviously the green circles, and then I did some yellow in the middle, and I found it really hard. I don't have any squishing out the sides or anything. I found it really hard to kind of make it get to the sides. So I must admit, even though it went up to the sides here, there was no squishing out or mushing out. So this technique was really nice and clean, and I didn't get all kind of crazy Nuvo drops everywhere. But I wanted to show you what I ended up doing with these beautiful pieces. So I have some embossable plastic here. This is just something that you can heat emboss on. This Judikins one is a good brand. I'm sure there are other brands that you can use as well. I'm popping this into my stamp platform, which I have a sticky mat down there as well. Then I'm going to use this new stamp set from Elena Crafts. She has all of her stamp sets. She has a whole lot of designers and everything who design all of these for her. I will leave links to all of these products down below. There's also a coordinating die set, and anything is going to work here. Anything at all. If you have flowers, they are going to look gorgeous. Butterflies, anything that you can kind of have a little bit of see-through space. And that is the key here, because I am going to stamp these down on some acetate. And now I am using some VersaFine Onyx black ink. This will not dry by itself on the acetate, so you do need to add some embossing powder. Something like StazOn would work. and that would dry on the acetate without having to add embossing powder and things, but I chose to do it this way. Now I know that there looks like there's a big gap there in the middle, but it's just the glare from the lights on the acetate. I am adding some clear embossing powder over this, and I did use my anti-static powder bag on my acetate before I stamped these. I stamped a couple of times depending on how inked up your ink pad is. And then I'm going to run my heat gun over these, and they have this gorgeous glossy embossed image. I wanted to make sure that there was some gaps. As I said, that's why flowers or something like that would be perfect, something that you can see through a little bit. Otherwise it kind of defeats the purpose of using the acetate. You could use vellum if you wanted to kind of dull it down a little bit depending on how big the gaps are in your image, but because these butterflies are fairly small, I thought I would use some acetate. Now I am going to cut these out. You can run these through a die cutting machine just like you would any other paper, and they will die cut really nicely. I did a couple of extra butterflies earlier as well, so I had a little bit of choice because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to end up doing here. Now these are some of the ones that I created earlier on, and this is kind of just stripes, and I guess most of these I was thinking I would die cut out, so I know that they kind of look like a big blob in the middle of a page, but that gorgeous texture is just really fun and kind of hard to recreate. So obviously I kind of have two of every image, and it is shiny, and this is the light blues and dark blues. This one I used some of the glitter Nuvo drops on with just some gorgeous spots. But I can imagine sort of big love hearts cut out of these, or lots of shapes and lots of flowers that you could, all sorts of kind of really exciting things. So I just started off really nice and simple, and these ones are just the normal kind of blobs that I did, and actually they are the ones that I'm going to use today because they are the kind of the cleanest and simplest that I'm going to pop all of this stamping on top of. I'm using my Hero Arts Infinity die set. This is one of those staple die sets, not necessarily this one, but a circle layering die set or stacking die set is really key. If you are really into card making, or you really enjoy die cutting, then I would suggest perhaps the kind of main shapes like a rectangle, a square, or a circle, or whatever you thought you might use most often. This is something I definitely pull out most often in my card making. But to each his own, and also of course you can just draw around a shape and then cut it out with your scissors. That's going to work perfectly as well. I just went through and found 3 of the different size circles that I thought I would use, and then picked out some colors that I thought I would use. I did some more earlier on, and I'm going to add a few more colors to these ones. Now, usually I list all of the items that I've used in the video in the description box below this video here on YouTube. However, I'm not going to list all the individual names of the Nuvo drops, and as I said, you don't even have to use the Nuvo ones. Anything is going to work out really well, so just use what you have and the colors that you have already, and that will work perfect. So I've die cut out this yellow one, and it's really cool because even though you can kind of bend this around, the Nuvo drops don't crack at all. They stay really nice and solid and shiny, just like you see now. I was worried that if I run them through my die cutting machine they might crack because they were dry, but nope, they were perfect. And look at all of this gorgeous texture here. This is really fun. A very simple card put together, and I'm going to add a little bit of dimension behind these dots just because this is such a simple card. So I'm using some of the my favorite foam tape and just popping these up. You could use layered up pieces of cardstock, you could use foam squares, you can use fun foam, kids fun foam, anything to give them a little bit of dimension. And then a couple of these are going to be just slightly hanging off the edge, and I really kind of like this look. I did need to remember that to leave room for my sentiment as well, which I nearly forgot to add on here. I turn these over, and with the long bladed scissors I'm going to cut a nice big long stroke, and then it is nice and clean around the outside. This is the leaf canopy stamp set. You guys have seen this one lots. It has some really good sentiments in it, as well as those gorgeous big leaves in it or foliage. And this one, this stamp here, I'm going to stamp out in some VersaFine Onyx black ink, so the same ink that I used to stamp with the butterflies. And this one says life is better with friends, so you can see it's stamped really clean and clear. Even though I forgot and I had the little bit of dimension behind the circles, it worked out fine in the end as well. Now to adhere down these circles, I'm just popping on a little bit of really strong double-sided adhesive. You could definitely use some liquid glue, but I find that when I'm dealing with acetate, I prefer to use double-sided tape. I find it more reliable, and it sticks really well to those squished Nuvo drops as well. So once I put the butterflies on top, they are absolutely absolutely striking and they stand out beautifully. I chose to use kind of 3 of the smaller butterflies, but this was a really fun card to create. I am going to add some very simple little dots here, there, and everywhere with just a fine liner black pen, and that kind of finishes off this very clean and simple card. But I hope that you give it a go doing some of the Nuvo drop smooshing. It's a really fun technique and lots of fun die cutting options after you have created those beautiful smooshing circles. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope that you've enjoyed this video and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks, bye!